everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's Table Talk. This morning, or today, you'll see that I have Conrad Story with me, and we're going to talk about some of the life obedience that Conrad has walked through. And so, Conrad, before we really jump into some of your stories and how it impacted your life, why don't you introduce yourself and maybe your family, while some people from Bethel or watching might not know who you are.
Okay, thanks, Pastor Chad, for having me on. And I come from a Christian family right from the get-go. And I have two sisters and a brother, and they all have spouses and extra kids. And my mom is still alive, and my wife's mother is still alive. And it's been a great family. I have great brothers and sisters, and we have good times together. And so as a Christian, we grew up that way. We celebrated all the major happenings and days and special events. But I didn't really accept Christ, I would say, until in my mid-20s. What happened with me is in our church, we made a profession of faith, and you basically did the loyalty program, and then you committed yourself. But the truth was, did your heart really commit? And so I had an experience out west when I was working, and I worked in a Fort Chipewyan, which is in the northern Indian community, and they had a little white church with 3 nuns. And for 7 or 8 months, I didn't go to church. And I questioned that a little bit, but we worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I didn't think too much of it, other than it made me realize that when I got home, I was either going to be all in or I was going to be all out. Right. And that's the way I viewed the Christianity at the time, was that either I wanted the lifestyle that I had experienced for 20 years with my family and the things that I've been taught and all the things that were relevant to that and what was really important, or you could just say, you know what, I'm just going to walk a different way. And so that's where my choice was made, and my decision was made to be a follower. And that was going to be the journey for me, because there are so many other journeys you could have in life. So that's how it started.
Very cool. I did not know that you worked out west for a while. So we keep learning as we talk. And for those that don't know, Conrad is one of our board of directors at the church, and he has great testimony. And so, Conrad, you and I have had the opportunity to talk back and forth sometimes, or driving in your truck, or we've been to the Dominican a couple of times together, and we'll get into some of that later. But through this conversation, through our relationship, as we continue to get to know each other more and more, you've shared some stories with me of how God has spoken to you and how he's woken you in the night, and it's just led different paths of your life. And after we talked on Sunday morning about, we had the service or the sermon called like No. We talked about Moses and how God appeared to him and called him, but Moses listed off all of these excuses why he shouldn't do it. It brought back to my mind just your stories on how God spoke to you. And from our conversations, you had no excuses. You immediately just followed. And I remember one of the stories was when you owned your own construction company, and you were at a big a fair or something like that, where you had a booth set up, and God talked to you about building a certain subdivision. Can you tell us a little bit of this story?
Well, I was the chairman or president of the Stratford Home Builders for a year, and I was also on the home show committee for a number of years. And at that time in Stratford, there was a development in the north of the country club that had, I think it was 170 or 180 lots available for sale. Wow. With the McLean family from St. Mary's. And I had been in business for a number of years already, and always had this dream of, well, should I build more houses or not houses, or spec houses, and, investments. But I was at that show every day early to open up, because I was in charge of tickets and the door and that sort of thing. And so the thing was laying there, and I had this thought or vision or whatever you want to call it, or prompting to say, well, go and buy 21 lots, 3 townhouses, bulk townhouses and 5 lots. And I didn't know what to do. And I went home and I thought, wow, that's just too big for me. That's just not, and that was on a Thursday, and Friday was the same way. I looked at that thing, and there was 171 lots, and I did my work at the home show. I had my booth. I was busy, but the notion was in the back of my mind to do something different and maybe to take a risk, I guess. But I didn't know if I was qualified to take that risk or in a position. So Saturday passed, and of the 171 lots, there was one sticker on one lot. And Saturday night, we all went home. I was one of the last out the door, and there they sat. And so on Sunday morning, Sunday, the home show only ran from 12 till 5. And Sunday morning, and I believe it was like 2 a.m, but I couldn't sleep that night. And it was just, either you have faith or you don't, but go buy those lots.
Wow.
And so Sunday I went in at 11:30, a half hour early, and I met my friend Al McLean there, who was taking care of the lot selling. And I said, I'd like to take this whole corner. I believe that I can do a nice job there, and that's what I'm kind of prompted to do. And so he put 21 stickers on the subdivision map, and that was my first excursion into spending close to $1 million without telling my wife. And that there she went. So at the end of the day at 5 o'clock, the entire subdivision was sold out. And that is more the remarkable part, that God said, have faith that you can do this. Have faith in me that I'm going to take care of your family, that I'm going to pursue your career, that I'm going to give you the work so you can employ people. And once I took that step, then after that, everything else was sold, because it's phenomenal, And so we have a lot of friends living in those buildings, and they're still standing, of course. And so that was just a special point in our construction company as well.
That's such an amazing story of how, you can look at it from so many different points, and just realizing like one lot was sold, and you basically got, in my mind, like as you tell the story, like God held back all the other buyers. And the moment you picked yours, then everybody else was almost released to go and buy.
It seemed that way. Yeah. That's far more noteworthy of God's working than actually buying the silly lots. Like, I mean, it's just the circumstances around when God asks you to make decisions. They're life-changing decisions, but not just because of you. They're life-changing decisions for a lot of other reasons. And I think sometimes we have to dig a bit deeper to see that, or we do see it in the future a little bit too. Not in the future, right. Sorry, in the past.
Yeah.
Right. We all have that. We look in the past and go, well, now I understand, and so.
So on that note, then, if you're looking back, what is the one thing that you kind of take out of that?
What do I take out of that? It was remarkable that I listened. I think,
right.
I think that is remarkable, and I take out of it as just God's favor.
Yeah.
That he gave us favor for that thing, because we worked up there for 3 or 4 years to complete that subdivision, along with a couple other ones at the time, and so it's God's providing and His favor when you listen, to what He said. Go ahead and do this, and
yeah.
So
that's amazing. And so, how long were you in the construction business?
I had the business for 19 years, but I had worked in construction for a number of years before that.
Yeah.
Including, high school days when you work in the construction as a painter. And I had spent 4 months out in Medicine Hat as well, and doing engineering work in water and sewer. And so quite a bit of different construction experience, but about 20 years altogether, 24
Wow.
years. So.
And so you've had a construction company for 19 years. And for the people that know you today, they know that you and Kim and Ben, you own and run the Forest Motel. And how did that shift happen? I know the story, but yeah. For 19 years of construction to now running a hotel, like a motel and stuff, can you tell that story? Because this story is amazing for me.
Well, it's, a lot of men when they have a career, they think they're tied to that career forever.
Yeah.
And after that happened to me, that I changed careers, which now it's 16 years ago. So it's an old story where some people don't even understand that there was 2 lifetimes ahead, 2 different occupations. And when that happened, I actually had people phone me and come up to me and say, do you have cancer? Or are you feeling all right? Or what is going on? Why would you quit a business and buy something else? And so then I get to tell them the short story. I'll keep it real short. But after 20 years in construction and, sore back and tired knees, and we had 5 to 9 employees. And there was a year where we had no lots available in Stratford. And during that time as well, my daughter came down with Stargardt's disease. And so she was starting to go legally blind. And a few months after her diagnosis, which took her about 6 months to become blind, my son came down with seizures and epilepsy. And so our marriage was at a tough spot with kids, the family. What do we do? And we were driving every day to Stephenville for Kim for school and to Stratford for sports and church and everything. And we were on the road 3-4 hours a day. Wow. And I said to my wife, I said, Kim, Joseph may never drive. He was 15 when he started his seizures. And I says, Rachel will never drive. And I said, we're going to be driving for another 10 or 15 years and that sort of thing. So we didn't, it was just tough times. We just, there was, what are we going to do? Where are we going? And I struggled with that for half a year or 8 months with the Lord in particular at night. And so at 2:09 one morning, I don't know if it was a Thursday morning, at 2:09 in the morning again, I was woken up and the Lord just says, you need to go see the Forest Motel. And I had, in my knowledge, I didn't even know where it was or that it existed. I had heard the name, and I think I'd only ever driven down Forest Road once in the 20 years we lived here. And so I phoned my real estate agent, and without telling Kim again, so these are troubling things, but I said to my real estate agent, who's a Christian, I says, Sue, I says, you'll understand this, but I'm going to tell you what happened last night. And I said, is that place for sale? And she said, yes, it's for sale. It's on Forest Road and it's been for sale for 4 years and they can't sell it. And to me, that was a bit of a prod from the Lord too, saying something's waiting, like, what is it? And so I asked her, I said, set up an appointment, let's go see it. And so we did. We spent 2 hours there with the owners and I walked around. And as a builder and designer, I looked at the whole place and I went, okay, I see the vision. I see the vision laid out before me, basically. And so that process was started right there. And you talk about obedience. The hardest part about the obedience was that I now had to go home and tell my wife that this dream had occurred, or this wasn't even a dream because I was awake. Yeah. I was awakened by it. And so we made more appointments. And I took her there and my mother-in-law, and I had a list of all the pros and a couple lists of the cons. But we're talking a major shift: quitting a business, letting employees go, moving, selling your farmhouse, which was your dream house, out in the country, moving all your kids to town. Such a major shift in life. And God just said, you know what, here it is. And, I will be with you. I'll take care, whatever. And to follow that, I don't know. I like I said, a lot of people called and said, are you feeling all right? Because that was a drastic one, Yeah. And I had one friend of mine, he said to me, the neatest or the weirdest thing about those sales when they closed, he said, my 2 favorite properties were your farm in the country, because we used to have builder dinners there. And he says, was a Forest Motel. And he says, I heard they both sold on the same day. He says, and then I found out that you were involved in both of them. and that kind of struck me, but we have a beautiful place to live, and the Lord certainly has provided everything, so it's a big one.
It's, for me, just hearing your stories that we've had the privilege, just to, I said, like, talk you've challenged me in my own life on just when I hear the voice of God. And we talked about this a little bit about like when we hear the voice of God and are we listening to his voice? And I said, like, did you go and talk to anybody to get feedback? And you said this line to me. And
yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, like literally, we just talked about this, I think, last night. And you said this line to me, and it has not left my head this whole, like the last 24 hours. And I've talked to Melissa about it. And when you said, you know, we seek wisdom at times, but no one can hear the voice of God for your life but you. And you said it something like that. And it was so powerful for me that I'm now, honestly, I'm looking back in my life in the last, 24 hours since we talked about this. And you said that, I'm looking back going, have I talked myself out of God's plan? Like, have I had times where I feel God telling me I should do something? Right. And instead of just, like you did, get up and go and do it, or look into it and start moving forward. Like, how many times have I kind of like, sought out other people, like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I've almost talked myself out of it because I've listened to men instead of just hearing God's voice and walking.
That's the other part of the question is who has talked you out of it?
Right.
Instead of talking yourself out of it, has somebody else, and is that good or bad? But if they haven't heard the voice of God for you, they can't. Like it's a really weird experience. And it's like, and no matter even to your spouse, you can explain it to them. They didn't hear it.
Right.
They're taking your advice that, yeah, you did hear it and that you're not wacko, like, I mean, no, sometimes people think like it's really, yeah. And you have to have a Christian spouse to support that, I believe.
Well, cause like all the ones that we've just talked about, like the first two that we've talked about, like those are major steps that you're taking. And if Kim hasn't heard, or if she's kind of like, if she hasn't heard the voice of God, or she's not right there, she has to know and believe and trust that her husband spends time with God, knows God's voice, and goes, all right, I'm going to trust and come along with you. Like that speaks volumes to your relationship as well.
Right. Yeah. We've had a lot of journeys together, and she's heard the voice as well, on different things. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys, honestly, like Melissa and I, we look at you guys and you're such an incredible couple, and your marriage relationship just speaks volumes to other people. And so I just thank you for your faith. There's one more area I want to talk about, because Melissa and I both have had the privilege to travel with you and Kim to the Dominican Republic to do missions work down there. I've had the privilege of going a couple times. And how did you guys get involved in this work?
And that's really, it's a different God's call. And I don't know if, I guess when people hear these three stories fresh, they might say, yeah, it's a different type of call. But we were in the old Pentecostal church in Stratford in the basement. Kim and I had applied for admissions when we got married, and that was turned down because we were just too young and whatever. And we really didn't know what. So we dedicated ourselves to our church family at the CRC church for cadets and Calvinettes, doing kids programs for 8 years. Yeah. And at the same time decided not to have a TV because we were going to do the kids programs in church. So there was a missionary, Pastor Neil, and his wife Sandy, who were just starting in the Dominican, and they were setting up a mission field. And they said, I guess the outlook of that mission was, if we build the churches and the parsonages, the change in the people there and creating churches will be so much easier because they have a place to meet, because they're Haitians and it's absolutely desperately poor. And it's one thing to convert people and say, here's God's love, and here's Christianity, and here's the Bible. And we'd love for you to become Christians, but a church needs a home. It needs a spot. You just don't do it underneath a banana plant, or underneath a coconut tree. And so their vision was to build. And I hardly remember what he presented, pictures, whatnot, all that evening. The only thing I remember at the end was his call. He said, if you want to come down to Dominican and do a building project, all you have to do to go is just to say, I'll go. And so after the meeting, I went up to him and with Kim, and I can't remember if I asked Kim or not again, but I think we went up together and we said, we'll go. That was it. And so the call was through somebody else, not through a dream or a vision. And it was just a thing of obedience, though, in a different way. And I think that's what makes that unique. And as soon as we said we would go, he said, well, that's great. He says, get a team of 12 together. And, and we needed, I think, $7,000 to go down and build this church and community center and shelter from storm. And that was in 1989, I believe. 1989, because we went again in 1991, and we've been there 20 trips, since. So it's just a different call, and something maybe in a sense we were kind of looking for, like you're trying to find a spot of service, a spot in God's kingdom to do what you can with the talents you have, and so maybe praying out, because Kim and I had applied for missions. I believe that God said, okay, I guess all three instances, he says, I have a spot for you, right? So I'll show you it, but you got to say, I go, or I do, or I will. Right. And it's just so cool. I'm still kind of dumbfounded sometimes because, Chad, too, you and me, we talked about this last night, and as men too, in that we get all kinds of dreams and visions and different things, and not all things are right or good, right. Or not all things are callings, or not all things are of God. And so, maybe for me, I cherry picked 3 out of my life, but those were life changers, and they were substantial, and they have and always have had an effect on doing good and helping other people as well. Right. So, but you don't pick your battles, but I think God picks you for what you need to do. So, yeah.
I know, like, as we talked last night, making sure that our thoughts are pure and on God, and that way we can help zone into his voice over the other voices that are bouncing around in our head.
Yeah, exactly.
And as we kind of wrap this up, Conrad, with those stories, and they're so powerful, and just even talking now, like, do you have any advice on hearing and obeying for any other person listening?
I don't know. It's hard to give advice about hearing. Yeah. Because, either you hear or you don't. I don't totally understand it, quite honestly, all the time. It's just that this is what happened to me. Right. And but I think when you hear things that you, if they're right, if they're honest, true, if they're spiritually discerned from God, and if they move you forward in your Christian life, and you say, well, you know what? Okay, I get that. I don't think there's going to be earth-shattering things for every person all the time. And quite honestly, like, I'm looking for the next one, because it's been a while, right? Yeah. And so it's not like you get these things every night or every month or once a year. But once in a while, I think everybody can say once in a while in their life they've had a substantial something that has happened to them, and they can credit it to listening to God's will. Yeah. So,
and I think even that statement, like, you're waiting for something now, but as you wait, you're faithful in what you already know. And so we keep moving forward, and we keep moving forward what God has called us to. And so until he brings something else, or he speaks clearly about something else, you're so faithful with the motel and the creativity of you guys. So much creativity I've seen you guys do through this lockdown time and different things, just to bring business your way. And the creativity has been amazing, and just see how God plants ideas and stuff into you guys. But then you're faithful with that. You're faithful with the Dominican, continue to serve and continue to go, as, like you said, as we're waiting for God to speak to us. It doesn't mean we stop. We keep going with what he's already called us to.
And I think that's really, I was thinking about that this week, about when you were talking about Moses and the people in Egypt, and their time in the desert. And we're talking 40 years, 400 years, 300 years, really, for us too, if we think we're waiting, we might wait forever. We don't really know that we're going to get this call or that call, because the people in Egypt and Pharaoh and all that, they were still, as you said, exercising their Christianity, or being who they were as Jews and that sort of thing. But 400 years, that's like, or even 40 years. Was it 40 years in the desert? That's
40 years, yeah.
two generations. And
Right.
do we wait that long for an answer? It's hard to fathom.
Most of us don't like waiting 40 minutes.
Yeah. So I don't think we should be discouraged, is all I'm saying.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
I agree. And we think of some of the promises in the Bible, like Abraham was promised to be the father of nations. Well, that promise was fulfilled, but he was gone way before then.
Right. Yeah.
And so God is faithful to fulfill his promises, and we are supposed to be faithful to fulfill our part.
Yeah. And he was 100 years old for his first that faith test as well, right?
Absolutely, right?
So, yeah. It's time is kind of we have to be cautious that we don't over frustrate ourselves.
Yes.
In waiting, because we don't know God's timing.
No, and in the timing, in the process, we have to know and be faithful. And I think it's more of a knowing and believing that God, whatever you're doing in this time period, is preparing me for the next. And that's what Moses did while he was in the desert looking after the sheep before he took the Israelites in and looked after them. And so God's constantly building us. And so, as always, Conrad, this has been so much fun for me just to sit and talk with you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, I love your stories. I love your faith. And so for all the people listening, if you don't know, you want to go online, check out the Forest Motel's website, see all the stuff they have going on. And if you're looking for something to do, they got tons of stuff. So check it out, book some skating or some cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and get out there and support Conroy and Kim. And so, Conroy, thank you for your time. And we just pray blessing over you and your family and your business.
Thank you very much, Chad.